Okay, when you're animating layers individually, it can become quite tedious. Now, what I want you to do if you want to follow along is open up Expressions and Scripting project from Expressions and Scripting folder, and then open 080 Control Layers Composition. And in there, you'll see my little thug figure. Now, if I'm to start animating these body parts just by using the properties down in the timeline, it can become quite tedious. You'll see here I've set up a parenting structure so that if I open up the rotation of the upper arm, I can move the arm and then open up the rotation of the lower arm, and I can animate that individually. Okay, so the lower arm will follow the upper arm, but the upper arm can animate individually. Similarly with the legs, if I animate the thigh, you'll see that moves, and then I can animate the shin. Although the shin moves with the thigh, it can still animate independently from the thigh, and we can even animate the boot independently. Okay, now the boot's anchor point should actually be up here, so let me just move that while I have a minute, and you can also do that as well. Just select the boot layers, choose the pan behind tool, and just move the anchor point up here so that when we rotate the boot, it rotates around the correct point. Now you can see how fiddly that is. I'm having to scroll through lots of layers. So one solution is to work with control layers, which can control all the body parts. So I'm going to go to Layer, New, Null Object, and we're going to call that Control Layer. So I'm going to hit Enter on the keyboard, or Return rather, and type in Control Layer. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is apply an effect to the control layer, and it's one of the expression control effects. And these are like empty interface items that you can attach to expressions to help you control them. For example, I have an angle control, which I use to control rotation. So say, for example, I want to start with the head and open up the rotation value of the head. And basically what I want to do is link this rotation value to this effect. Now you'll notice when I select the head layer, the effect disappears from here. So when you're working with control layers, what you probably want to do is just click on the lock here in the effect control panel, so that when you select the other layers, the effects remain here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to alt-click on the rotation stopwatch, and I'm going to drag it up to the angle value of the control layer. And now, when I adjust this control, it adjusts his head. Now really, I should rename these, so I should rename that head rotation. Okay, and I rename it by selecting the name and hitting return on the keyboard. Now you'll notice that the expression updates when I do that. Okay, so it's updated the expression with the new name, so no problem renaming those after the fact. So I've now got something to control the head rotation. What I want to do now is add another one. So let's go to Effect, and Angle Control should be here because it was the last effect used. This time I'll hit Return, and I'll call it Upper Arm 1. Upper Arm 01 Rotation. Okay. And then I'm going to select Upper Arm 01, Alt-click on the stopwatch, drag this to the angle control, and now I have a controller for the angle of that arm. And you can see how it works. So basically you adjust these until you get them exactly where you want them. Now, as well as having rotations, you have other effects as well. So if we go into Expression Controls, Slider Control, I could use a slider to control maybe the position of his stomach, make it wobble up and down. So we'll call this stomach position, and we will take the position. Now let's just go down and get the stomach. Where is it? Okay, so we're going to get the position value, and we're going to add an expression to that, and we're going to link to the stomach position slider. Okay, now you'll notice something weird happens when I do that. Because the value is 0 of the slider, when I type in 0, or when I attach it, first of all, the position value for the X and Y is going to go to 0. Now you'll notice that if I pull that down, I can pull him back into the centre of the comp again. Now the only thing about that is it means that my wobble is going to affect the X and the Y axis, and I don't really want that to happen. So what I'm going to do is go down to this expression and edit it slightly. So what we're going to do is we're going to say A equals that expression. So I'm going to use A as my variable here. And of course that's not going to work to begin with, but we don't need to worry about that. The reason is because I've changed the variable from the word temp to A. Now the X value we don't want to change. We want that to remain as it was originally, which was 258 pixels. So I'm going to type in 258. And then on this side, I'm going to take the slider value. So that means the slider value is only going to control this side. Now, I don't have to actually type all of that in by linking. What I can do is just type in the letter A, which represents that value. And now I have a slider that only controls the up and down values. So if I want to, I can wiggle that. So let's have a look at that. I can open up the stomach position value and add a wiggle effect to it. Now, a wiggle effect will randomize the value. So I'll type in wiggle, open parentheses. Now we need to say how often do we want it to wiggle. So let's say 3 times per second. Add in a comma and then say by how much do we want it to wiggle. So let's say 10 pixels. Close the parentheses. Oh, that's maybe a bit too much. So wiggle 3, 10. And if I preview that, you'll see we've now got a random wiggle value on position. So what I want you to do is play with these expressions. And if you want to, you can look at 08B, control layer's end, as a reference. And if we open up the control layer in here, so let's hit E for effects, and then double click the left leg to open it up. And you'll see here we have control for the left leg. Now we need to attach the boot there. The right leg. Okay, if you want to attach the boot, all we have to do is just take the boots and attach them to the shins. So boot 1 to shin 1, boot 2 to shin 2. And now when we scrub that, the boot should move with it. And this is a really good way of creating a walk cycle. So rather than have to go down to the layers themselves, you can just use the control layers to create controls for your puppet. Okay, and of course you can put things in for scale and position and all those other values as well. So that's a little bit about control layers.